How are you?
Fine, how are you?
Good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yes, I was just telling people this will be a little bit different from the last one in that we're doing it more webinar style. So we'll be taking questions through the Q&A feature. I
Okay.
already see a question in there. And since we only have 30 minutes, we can dive right in. First, I just want to ask, how are you doing? Are you okay?
Hi, I'm doing fine.
Good.
Yeah, pretty
Awesome.
good. Just here, all alone. Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to ask real quick before we jump into other questions is there anything that you're learning from this experience, like about yourself or just, interesting in life in general?
Wow. I haven't really learned much about myself. I knew I was an introvert, so being alone has never really bothered me, but I have learned that there's a limit to how much I enjoy it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've kind of considered myself an ambivert, but I'm realizing I'm a lot more introverted than I thought I was.
Yeah. Like I haven't left my apartment in like a month, and that's a little much. So yeah.
So we did get a question ahead of time. Yaylee sent one in. She wasn't able to join us, so I'll ask hers first. She says hi with the little waving emoji.
Mhm.
And she said, hope you're doing well. Thank you for doing the AMA. And then let me jump to the question. Here it is. I'd love to know about how you and Mina organize design systems work within your teams, managing multiple projects, different stakeholders, teams, different priorities, and making sure that people outside and maybe also inside the design system team know what you're up to. This is basically her main issue she's looking at right now. So,
Okay.
want to take that one?
So how do we paraphrase the question? How do I organize a design system within our team and manage multiple projects? Is that what the gist of it?
It sounds like that plus communicating that out to people in and out the team.
So the design system that I work on at Slack is slightly different in the sense that basically the same people who build it are the main people who use it. I build a design system for our marketing side, our marketing materials. So there's a different design system for the actual Slack product.
Mhm.
And the difference there is that the design systems team for the Slack product um, has a bunch of different users for all over the organization, whereas the marketing web team, I guess, like that's what we're called, but it's what people know us as.
Mhm.
We basically build it, and we are the main people who use it. So in that sense, we don't have to do a lot of like education and communication around it because we are the people who build it are the ones who are aware of it and who use it and all of that. I actually I've had to start getting better at the advocacy part of it because more teams outside of our core users are starting to like want to be able to leverage it. So that part is something that I'm still getting better at, like educating how this system is different from the other one that they're used to and when it's appropriate to use one versus the other. As far as how we organize it, that we kind of treat the design system as a sort of extension of the website that it powers. That I want to change because I want people to see it as its own separate project, separate from the things that the product serves. But it came to be that way because it was built at the same time as the website was. So in people's heads, it wasn't really a separate thing. It was all in one.
Right.
That I want to get rid. That is a perception I want to change, and I want to show people that yes, this is just a tool. It's a product like anything else we use that can be used in other scenarios outside of the one it was built for. I think that's what the question, but yeah.
Let me double check. Um, I think that was pretty much it. Yeah, like letting people know what you're up to and that sort of thing. She also asked it of me, which is weird for me right now because I'm actually not currently working on a design system. So
Mm-hmm.
anything I would talk about would be from my past experience.
Yeah.
I think I've talked a lot about how things were at Salesforce. We had our centralized team as well as our federated contributors working together. how we communicated things, a lot of communication. So, Slack, Chatter, we had our updates that we would do during the UX town hall. We would have our big, sprints with the entire engineering team. And so there was just a lot of different avenues for us. At Amazon, it was a little different because I was kind of a design system team of one for the most part. I had a designer that would help me out a little bit whenever he had time. So that was a very different situation. So we have a question from Jeff. How can I convince engineering that Angular material is not a design system?
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't know what Angular material is, but I'm going to assume it's more of a component library or a collection of components, and he can correct me if I'm wrong about that later. But I think that's a hard question to answer because there's still a lot of confusion as to what is and is not considered a design system. Like, depending on who you ask, you will get a different answer. Like, some people think that literally just a UI kit or a component library is, and in fact, a design system. And I think that I've said this before, but I think that the hyper focus that we kind of have on the component aspect of it is kind of conflated what a design system actually is. People equate it with just components. So if you're thinking about components only, then pretty much anything that has a collection of components might be considered a design system. Whereas I know you and I have similar views. We're like, no, it's a whole encompassing ecosystem of a bunch of different things that all sort of empower how you build products at your company or how you tell your company's like product or brand story. Like, and that includes, editorial guidelines, and it includes the code framework that's used to build out these things. Like, it includes a lot of different things. So I guess the way to answer the question, I guess the best way to say that would be kind of educating them as to what a design system is in your view, since the community as itself doesn't have a real consensus around this question. I would just try to tell them, here, it's part of a design system. True, it can be part of a design system, but it's not in and of itself a system. And a system needs X, Y, Z pieces. It needs processes in place. It needs principles that govern everything. Like, it needs more than just the pieces to put together the product.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like a lot of people they're just very visible or visual people. And so they visualize that artifact, the UI kit or the component library, and that's what they think of because that's what they see. And it's hard to really tell people that maybe aren't super into what we do that there's like all these invisible pieces of it that are part of it too.
Yeah. Actually, a good analogy that I and my friend Amelie, Amelie Nama, she and I we did this thought exercise where we talked about systems separate from like web, kind of try to illustrate how analogies of like the way other systems work in the world can help educate to what a design system is. So, for example, the MTA or the transportation system in any given metropolitan area, like, it is a system in a sense that it has a lot of pieces that are involved in making that run smoothly. But the system is not the subway cars, it's not the stations, it's not the tracks, it's like the whole thing. And it takes all those parts to do the job of the system, which is get people from one point to another. So, yeah.
I really like that analogy a lot. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question, and folks, don't hesitate to get your questions in. So this is from Ryan. How do you determine the strictness of a design system? We currently have 2 products using our design system and are both B2B and want them to appear relatively similar, but hear pushback from designers that components need slightly tweaked. How do we handle the small tweaks that designers want, or should we even allow those? Okay, so I feel like that's a 2-parter, like the strictness as well as handling the differences when you do need to cater to different products.
I have been struggling with this aspect of it myself because for a while, and it's kind of stems from my pantsuit days working at Hillary for America, where like I was the end all be all of design system, and basically I decided what was and was not in it. It was a very strict kind of rule that was appropriate in that circumstance.
Right.
So I have struggled a bit in letting go of that mentality as I'm working more in a team, and I can do more of the what I guess is the more ideal model of how to run a design system. I also, because the design system I run at Slack is not for a product, it's for marketing, which is generally speaking more creative and more editorial.
Mhm.
In that sense, knowing what this system is supposed to serve, I've tried to strike a balance between being strict and allowing for that necessary editorial creativity to tell the story that our designers are trying to tell. So I've kind of made this sort of a very loose framework to guide our designers in a sense where I'm like, we need all of the foundation, all the soups, the nuts and bolts of the system to be strict. Like, do not change them unless you have a very good reason. Like, don't start tweaking the buttons, don't tweak a lot of the cards, don't tweak colors and font and typography. Like, all like the very basic building blocks. Those are very strict, and try not to go outside of them. But you can get more creative in like the illustrative style that you're using, or maybe the big layout pieces. Like maybe you want to have a very abstract or asymmetrical layout for the page as a whole, but the pieces inside of these layout objects are
Mhm.
very strict. So it's just more of like striking that balance between, okay, maybe we don't need to change things that are like truly global and all over the place, but you can allow some affordance of creativity on a larger page level.
Right.
That works again for our team and our purposes, but depending on what products you're trying to serve, that may not work out.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your talks I saw on like art direction and how you balance the strictness that you would see in a design system with the room for being exploratory with layouts using like CSS grid and all that. Do you
Yeah.
expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can't get to talk,
Oh
but
no, I'm not expecting
essentially,
a full talk, but
no, I
just
know what you mean. Yeah, so the way that I was talking about sort of art direction inside of a design system is sort of basically what I just said, is that we want to balance the being able to be strict and keeping the system aspect and the consistency aspect of a design system, but allowing that creativity. You can kind of do that in more of like I likened it to the Public Theater, which is a theater in New York. They have a very distinct and unique style for all of the shows that they do, but that style changes from year to year. And it's a good way to kind of show how you can have a very distinct voice and very consistent sort of pieces and components, but still allow for that creativity on a like seasonal basis.
yeah,
So it was more like, you're able to, I kind of liken it to if you were to change the visual language of a design system, um, in the public theater's case, on a seasonal basis. But for a web product, you can change, like slightly tweak the visual language of a system per maybe section or something. So if you have a very like stylized like section for one particular editorial type, or one particular type of editorial content, maybe the language of that part is slightly different, but the underlying structure, the underlying foundation is still the same.
yeah, that's awesome. Um, so we don't have any questions in the Q&A, so I'll just come up with some of my own. Oh, never
Oh,
mind.
there's one.
One just popped in. Would
Hey.
you recommend, this is from Ms. Suk, would you recommend any great examples of the design system guide websites that feature all different pieces for one company's design system?
Oh. I am a big fan of the 18F for the US or USDS.
Me
I think it's
too.
actually USDS. I'm
Yeah.
a big fan of their website and how they explain and document their design system. And I think it's a great example of documenting something that tends to be pretty strict, but also you really have no control over who and where it's used, because it's meant for the government, is meant for all kind of government websites, and they don't really get to have a say into who adopts it and who doesn't it. So who doesn't. So I love that they give not only here's how to use the system, but also they give like guidelines on here's how to build on top of it, particularly when they come when it comes to like accessibility compliance. As you'd imagine, that's a big thing
Yeah.
in government sites. And so they baked in accessibility into the system as much as they could, but of course, there's only so much you can do on that level. And
Mm-hmm.
so they provided guidelines as well as to how to continue to build on top of that foundation to make sure that you're still staying within compliance. So I love that part, that they not only thought about, hey, here's how to use this tool we built, but also here's how to improve upon it in your own work. Another example of a site I like Carbon from IBM. Like that's a
Yeah,
pretty
I'm
good
a
one.
big
Uh,
fan of Carbon.
yeah, like I think they did again a really great job of documenting like all the pieces, not just the components, but like the guidelines and the principles behind it. Like I think they do a really good job of that as well. And another one that pops in my head right now is probably Polaris from Shopify. Like I think that's a pretty good one too.
Yeah, they do a good job. I one thing I think is cool about the folks behind. I also get USDS and 18F a little confused sometimes, but
Yeah, I should know better, but I keep getting them slightly confused.
but one of the things I love that they do is they do so much communication and outreach to people. So like they have a public Slack that you can apply to join, regardless if you're working in government or not. Like I don't work in the government, but they let me join, and it was interesting to be in there because it's all these people that are working on different government websites or different projects, and they can like ask the team directly like questions and stuff, and it's pretty cool to see them engage the community that way. And I've been just kind of a lurker. Cool.
Yeah, cool.
Let's see. I'm going to ask the anonymous one first, just
Uh-huh.
because I think we had a question from Ryan earlier, and then I'll come back to your question, Ryan. The anonymous one: my team tends to pull me off of the design system to work on specific sites all the time. I keep losing months on the design system to work on other projects, and it's only me, the designer, and a part-time dev contractor. Do you think it's possible to make progress in that kind of situation?
Oh,
Actually,
yeah, that's actually the situation I'm kind of in right now. Because as I mentioned, the design system for our marketing side of Slack is not its own separate project or product, and therefore it doesn't have its own separate like team. Like it's the same team who tries to build out the system, the same team who's building out all of the pages that use it. So we kind of get stagnated in making progress solely on the system because we are still we're busy building things with it. What I've tried to do to help mitigate that is, first of all, I've tried very, very hard and failed mostly to get it like officially on the roadmap so it can be considered its own thing and have appropriate resources assigned to it, and to free up our bandwidth a bit to actually work on it. That has failed for a lot of reasons that I can't truly get into. Essentially, it's just we would need buy-in from like executive level to like stop putting out all the other things that are on their roadmap to work on this, which isn't realistic. So what I've tried to do instead is I personally have carved out time on my calendar, my schedule to work on this. I've blocked out time where I don't let people have meetings with me, and I focus solely on improving that system. I've been able to justify that more as I'm seeing more people who are trying to use it and find the documentation or parts of it lacking. And whenever I see those messages, I kind of just ping them to my manager. I'm like, look, this is going to keep happening until I'm able to devote time to actually fix these problems. And I'm a little bit privileged in that sense to where because I'm a staff engineer, I do have a little bit more of the authority and the autonomy to like make demands in some sense. I also do have the industry like sort of visibility that speaks to they probably should listen to me, let me do this thing. And I recognize that not a lot of people have that. So what I would recommend doing is just documenting any pain points that might be solved by using the system, and say, if you would give me just one sprint, like just give me 2 weeks or so, and I can knock some of these things out and we don't have to think about it ever again. Like I would just try to do a little bit of compromise. Like maybe when I was trying to ask for it on the roadmap, maybe that was asking for too much. Like giving me like a month or so to do all of that probably wasn't realistic. So like, can I get a single sprint? No? Okay, fine. Can you give me 1 day a week where I do nothing but this? Like just how much time are you willing to bend with this? And
Yeah.
again, any pushback, just document any pain points you can find and be like, here's what this would solve.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Ooh, we got a few more questions coming in.
Oh,
Awesome.
hello.
So Ryan asks, we have a great workflow for designers and developers using our individual components, but are now starting to move toward page layout. Have you tackled page layout in your systems? And have you defined a grid using something like CSS classes and asked designers and developers to adhere to those? Or if you tried something like fish tanks container column component. I'll have to look at that link
I have
later.
to
But
look at that later.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I kind of mentioned, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but for the system that I built for Slack, I didn't build like a 12 column, like traditional type grid because we use CSS grid on the site and it doesn't really make sense to have like that structured like grid system in that sense. What I've done is I've made what I call CSS like grid layout objects to where we use CSS grid and we, in case we assign classes to them where we have like a layout object, so to speak, where we'll have like, okay, this is a 6x2, excuse me, a 3x2 grid where we have like 6 like squares and you can put whatever components or pieces in that layout. There's this one thing that I did where it's this sort of, if you go on Slack, like actually slackhq.com, if you go on it right now, there's this big section at the bottom or in the middle where it's these colorful squares that have this sort of really asymmetrical type of layout. That's a CSS grid layout object, which I made based on the designs that I got. Now it's used for that one particular scenario, but in theory, it is just a class and you can put anything inside of that class. So I tackled the grid in that sense where I've encouraged designers to think about the grid not as just a overall page level thing, but as a modular piece part of it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, James says, hi, Mina. I'm a big fan of SAS and love the
Oh,
articles and
hi,
talks
James.
you've done on SAS. What are your thoughts on the rise of CSS in JS, especially in React-based libraries?
Oh, James, why? No, I used to be very much in the camp of I hate this. This is silly. Why do people do this? But I've since evolved as a person and as an engineer, and I think use whatever tool works for you. To be perfectly honest, like there are cases where CSS and JS and using React-based components makes perfect sense. Slack Hit, the design system for Slack, does that, or for Slack product, they do that. The system that runs marketing does not do that, but that's because the tech stack and the ecosystem we work in is very different, and it doesn't make sense to use CSS and JS or React for the work that we do. So I really just think if that's the best tool for your team, for your end product, for your skill level, then you know what, use it. It's fine. Like it all kind of spits out the same computer garbage at the end anyway. So it doesn't matter all that much, I don't think.
Computer garbage.
Although I do truly miss SAS, and SAS is always going to be my first love. But I mean, just use what you need.
This one comes from Dan. Hi, Dan. He said, for both us, is there a way that you see design systems and design systems teams can be useful to combat any of the problems that COVID-19 has created, whether that's remote working or new product creation or creating further efficiencies or anything like that? Asking the hard questions, Dan.
Yes, wow. So I'll just speak from my experience that I've had in the past couple of weeks. Working for a company and a product like Slack in this sort of in this strange world that we find ourselves in, we're one of the companies that actually can help empower people during this time to get better at remote work and to use remote work. So and because I work on the marketing engineering team, we've been particularly busy in this time trying to pump out resources to help people to learn how to work remotely and how to use Slack to empower that work. So our design system internally has been pretty key in spinning up all these resources very, very quickly. We've had, I hope I'm not getting in trouble for giving too much away here, but we've had like maybe 2-3 day turnaround on a bunch of these projects, and to get these out the door, because we're trying to like get them out as soon as possible so people can like start getting back to work if they're able to work remotely. And so if we didn't have that system or that foundation in place, this work would be impossible to do at the pace we're being asked to do it.
Right.
As far as like a design system and outside of like a company like setting, like when I'm in, if there was a thing like a generic unstyled design system in the world, maybe that might be useful in letting nonprofits or other organizations spin up resources quickly as well, where maybe they don't have access to a designer or to an engineer. But I guess unless I'm talking about something like a bootstrap or whatever, but not quite like that, like a truly like unstyled type library where they can just use that to help them build the resources they need to get people the help that they need.
Yeah. I have a friend that works on Microsoft's Yammer product, and she said
Mm-hmm.
this has caused her team, and of course the Microsoft Teams team, to basically be like all hands on deck right now, because they're getting so much more usage than they had before. And you know, she's talked to me a little bit about like the design and engineering that's having to go behind this as well. And I definitely think systems play a part in that. um, it's I'm kind of outside of it right now, simply because I'm not actively working on a project right now. But I definitely see a world where systems enable you to like move very quickly and ship these features, like you said, like 2 to 3 days, and get them out to customers as quickly as possible. Um, you're welcome, Dan. I'm going to ask Todd. I'm going to ask Todd's first, and then come back to Ms. Sugg, since we answered one from you before. Hi, Todd. It says, how often have you come across difficulties in championing a design system for a client and company or company? If you have, what steps did you take to overcome that resistance from someone like an executive or stakeholder?
I've been fortunate in the sense that both places I've built design systems for, the person I would have had to convince was already on board. In the case of doing it for Really for America, the director of front end and design director and I all had the same idea at the same time. So we were all like, we need this thing collectively, and I was given the clear runway to do so and the autonomy to do so without really any resistance. Um, Something similar at Slack. I was actually hired to help do that part. I was hired to help build them a marketing design system. That was part of the appeal. I have gotten a bit of, I mentioned before, but I've gotten a bit of resistance and had to push back on actually giving me free time to do that and just that. And that's a battle I'm still sort of trying, I'm still fighting and kind of trying to win, where what I would love is just uninterrupted time to work on it. And that seems to be a tough ask to get approved. Every time I talk to people about this, whether it be managers or director, they all are on board with the idea of and the fact that we need it. Like, I don't have to convince them of the value. It's difficult to convince them of prioritizing that versus the other things we're trying to do. And that's a battle that, yeah, I still haven't quite figured out how. I'm still negotiating that particular battle. But as far as getting people to understand like the benefits of it, what I've done in the past to help bolster the argument I would have had was just document again the pain points and document all the ways that it improves developers' lives. I do this thing where I save Slack messages I see where people talk positively about it or say how it helped them or anything like that. And I gather them in my own private little channel just in case I need ammunition for certain arguments later. So I would suggest doing something like that. Just find the pain points and document them and then present your case in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I've always found showing the pain points is a much more effective way than just trying to explain it. Like, I was working on the flow from getting to the website's homepage all the way to signing up and spinning up an app, because I was working on like a cloud hosting company site. And so I basically printed out what that flow was step by step and taped them together so you could see the entire process. and then put our competitors' flow right next to us. And theirs was a very quick short flow where ours was like on the floor and like just going like several feet out. And then when people saw that visually, they're like, oh yeah, we need to fix this.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
show rather than tell is great.
yeah, so we'll take this last question from Ms. Zook. How do you accommodate marketing needs when the toolkit is mainly made for product design? Is this okay to let two different toolkits exist as long as the basic elements are the same?
So yeah, I alluded to this again a little earlier, but yeah, at Slack we didn't make a conscious decision to be like we're going to have two design systems. It was more like they both arise organically because the visual language of the two are very different. Like if you look at the Slack product versus Slack.com, you'll see there's very little that's actually like similar. We don't use the same fonts, we don't use the same colors, like and so in that sense, it didn't really make sense for Slackkit, the product design system, which existed before I got there. It didn't make sense to try to make that fit the marketing use case because they're serving two very different beasts.
Yeah.
So I think that it's okay, and in some cases, it's probably recommended. At least I would recommend having two separate systems. One thing that I would love to see, and I'm working on that, is to have like instead of thinking of like there's two separate design systems, we have like a overall like brand system that's under like one big umbrella, and then we have the product branch and the marketing branch, and we'll have like this, well, the umbrella doesn't work now, but the foundational like piece of here's what the Slack brand is, and then here's how we present that brand in our marketing materials, and here's how that brand is presented in the product itself. So I think if you have like that that base foundation of like solid foundation of what your brand is,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have agreed upon like variations for the different branches you need or for that brand, I think that's probably the model that I would work on.
Yeah,
That was a mixed metaphor with umbrella and branches and foundation, but whatever.
Spotify did a talk at Design Systems London recently where they revealed how they're doing their system of systems, because the way they do a car UI is not going to be the same thing as like your mobile app or whatever it is that you're using. So it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess my last question for you as we wrap up is there anything coming up for you that we can look out for or ways we can support you and your work?
Actually, no, I don't. The things that I had coming up this year were talks, which have been canceled at this point. So, yeah, I don't really have anything that's coming up that needs any kind of support or anything. I just, yeah, just feel free to just talk to me on Twitter and say hello. Like I always like talking to people. That's cool.
Awesome. Yeah, Mina's on Twitter as Mina Markham.
Yay.
So yeah, with that, we'll wrap. And thank you everybody for joining us. And our next one will be with Nathan Curtis. If you go to designsystems.eventbrite.com, you can see the ones that are coming up. Right now, I also have one with Val Head, and I'm still trying to line up the schedule, but that's where you can find everything. Thank you, everybody. Bye.